of Ottawa. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon.
It's rare that we get to talk about so much good news. Johnson & Johnson approved. Pfizer says it's going to speed up deliveries, 3.5 million more doses that weren't expected to get in Canada until the summertime. Will be here much sooner than that. AstraZeneca, 18,000 doses on their way to Manitoba. This is a good day.
It is a good day, and yet we always seem to find a reason to complain about the good day. So people are asking, why would I get this not so good shot over the good shot? Why are we extending the doses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? We can argue over the details, but overall, it's a good news day. We have a path out of this hell.
Okay, so let's address some of that. If they're saying that people between the ages of 18 and 64, starting next week in Manitoba, depending on your health conditions, could start getting the AstraZeneca vaccine. That one, the efficacy rate isn't as high. So does that mean if I get AstraZeneca that I have a 34-ish% chance of getting COVID? Is that what people should take from the effective percentages?
No, it means if you were to get COVID, there's a 34% chance you got it because the vaccine failed. So you're still really unlikely to get COVID. All of the vaccines have a 100% chance of keeping you out of the hospital and keeping you out of the morgue. That's the important message here. We've lost sight of what the goal is in the vaccination campaign. The goal isn't to make sure that each of us individually is 100% immune and resilient. The goal is to get sufficient immunity in the population so that life goes back to normal. Vaccines aren't treatments. They're not drugs in the traditional sense. They are applied to populations so that populations are resilient. So that's what we want. I think one of the problems is we saw people lining up to get the Cadillac for a couple of months, and now we're being offered the Volkswagen. And we're a little upset about that because we want the Cadillac. But both the Cadillac and the Volkswagen get you to work, and neither one of them is a rusty tricycle.
So this is also a communications issue, Raywat, simply because I think people don't understand what herd immunity is, how we get there. And certainly authorities are still trying to surmise at what point do we have enough immunity out there. So I think a lot of this is that we are looking at this from an individual perspective, but you as an epidemiologist and all those health perspectives are looking at this as a community perspective.
100%. That is the core of the argument going back the entire year. That's what we've been struggling with, is trying to convince people this is not about you and me. This is about the group. And it sounds all kumbaya, but that's exactly how it works. Going back to how we understand the infection fatality rate. People say, why should I be afraid of a disease with 0.5% fatality? Because as an individual, that doesn't really scare me. At the population level, that's tens of thousands of dead. The same with the vaccines. This is not about me becoming resilient. This is about getting sufficient penetration of resilience so that the entire society goes back to normal. I don't know how better to sell that, except to understand that there is a tipping point when enough people get sufficient vaccination, not complete vaccination, just sufficient. Then we open things up and transmission comes down and stop wearing masks and kids go back to school, all that great stuff. And it happens earlier.
Will we know that from an epidemiological perspective? Will we know that? Will we be able to say that, right now we're at that herd immunity point? Or will it be done, well after the fact and people saying, well, looking back, we achieved herd immunity probably 2 months ago?
Probably the latter, to be honest. Herd immunity, it's computed based upon the transmission rates, the R. It's 1 minus 1 over the R naught, if you care about the details of it. But we don't really know what the R naught is, the reproduction rate, until we get all the data comes in. But we'll know that we're approaching it when the transmission starts to go really low and isn't increasing, and when the test positivity rate is extremely low across the board. So we have indicators for determining when it's likely happening, but we won't know for sure. You're absolutely right until it's achieved. But we'll start seeing the benefits well before herd immunity is achieved. We'll get herd effects if the right people are vaccinated, people who are likely to transmit and people who are likely to die. So that's what we're looking at, and it looks like we'll get there sooner than we thought.
Do you think it's a bit of a double-edged sword that people have become, I'll use the word moderately because I think people think they're a lot more informed about how these things work than they truly are, but they're looking at the numbers and they can understand at a basic level when they look at the efficacy rates of the different vaccines versus, when we're dealing with other things and you're just watching TV and there's 4 different psoriasis drugs advertised on TV. You don't see people going, well, which one is the best? So a bit of a double-edged sword that people think that they're more informed than maybe they are. And that's that we really just need to explain it in a basic way to say, roll up your sleeve and get a shot.
Oh, 100%. And I haven't got any easy answers here. We try to explain the best we can. Even the supposed experts like myself, I guess, don't have all the answers, and we doubt ourselves all the time. And unfortunately, the people who should doubt themselves don't. So, it's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. The less you know, the more you think you know. The more you know, the more you doubt yourself. And that is the psychological game of public health communications. It's not perfect. But yes, you got to trust the public health experts. And even the public health experts won't be on the same page all the time, but the majority will be. Kind of like climate change. You're always going to find some outliers, but you got to follow what the majority say. And now we have real-life data coming from places like Israel and the UK, where vaccination is achieved at such high levels of penetration that we're seeing the effects on the population. So we can project and predict how it's going to unfold here based upon what we see around the world.
As you look at the rollouts in the different provinces, are you encouraged that we will achieve herd immunity? Because I think the anti-vaxxers or the hesitant group may be a little more vocal than everyone else.
Yeah, actual herd immunity may take longer to achieve because we're going to need probably 70 to 80%, depending upon which variant becomes dominant, to get vaccinated. And that probably requires the children to start getting vaccinated, and we don't have vaccines licensed for children yet, so it'll take a little longer. But again, we'll get herd effects. We'll get close to it well before the need to start injecting children, probably. And we'll start to deal with the anti-vaxxers at some point later this year. Right now, the problem is we don't have enough doses for people who want it. So we have demand outstripping supply. But eventually, supply will outstrip demand. That's when we deploy our extraordinary public health education campaigns to explain why these things work. And I think resistance will decline once people see that nothing bad is happening to most people who take the vaccine.
It's a sunny Friday, and happy to share some good news surrounding vaccines in this country. Raywat Deonandan, always a pleasure to have you. He is an epidemiologist from the University of Ottawa. In 10 minutes, Christian O'Mel.